In brightest day,
in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and today I'm going to talk about a recent retcon that was placed in the pages of the Green Lantern 80th Anniversary Special. A Golden Age character who has been a gay character in other multiverses is now heavily hinted at that in Earth Prime he is also a gay man, or at least attracted to other men as well. Now I imagine this will draw comparisons to the somewhat recent change for Bobby Drake, but it's certainly handled much differently here with a much defter hand, and I think it was actually executed pretty well. But I will be surprised if there isn't major pushback regarding this change of the Golden Age character Alan Scott. And if you're interested in my thoughts on the Green Lantern 80th Anniversary Special, there's going to be a full review on the channel on Sunday. But here I'm just going to talk about this story. First, I'm going to read the article from CBR.com, kind of laying out the history of this and the changes that are implied within the 80th Anniversary Special. And then my good friend Perch from Comics by Perch is going to join me. We're going to talk about all this. And at the end, he's going to lay down a challenge that he would like to debate the merits of this change with a channel contributor that's heavily opposed to it. So if you are a channel contributor to Thinking Critical, you're watching this and you think this is awful, let me know, because Perch would like to have a conversation or a debate with you live here on the channel. And I'm certainly interested in facilitating that conversation. But first, let's read the article from CBR.com, kind of laying this all out. Among the changes to the DC Universe introduced during the New 52 reboot was a new take on Green Lantern Alan Scott's sexuality. This version of the Golden Age superhero was gay, representing an increase in LGBTQ representation at DC. In the Green Lantern 80th Anniversary 100-page super spectacular story, Dark Things Cannot Stand the Light, released this week, the recently reintroduced Earth Prime Alan Scott is also implied to be gay. After the events of Flashpoint led to a restructuring of the core DC universe, the new Prime Earth was lacking many of the former heroes who'd lived in the world, including many members of the Justice Society of America. During the following New 52 initiative, Earth 2 was introduced as an alternate reality within the DC Multiverse. Earth 2, the typical DC Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are all killed in a battle against the invading armies of Darkseid. That leaves the responsibility of protecting the world to an assortment of other heroes, many of whom are reimaginings of the classic JSA characters. Among them is Alan Scott. On this Earth, he is a young executive with GBC Productions and an openly gay man. Alan is in a relationship with another man named Charlie, and even preparing to propose to him when they are caught in a terrible train accident. Only Alan survives the crash due to a mysterious green flame that appears and transforms him into the Green Lantern. The character becomes a prominent hero in the series, with his powers eventually revealed to be connected to the green, the unseen force that connects all natural life on Earth. Recent events have brought Alan Scott, along with the rest of the JSA, back into the core DC continuity as heroes from more than a half century ago. In the post-crisis DC universe, Alan Scott is straight. He marries a former villain and has two children, Jade and Obsidian, who become heroes in their own right. However, Dark Things Cannot Stand the Light, from the Green Lantern 80th Anniversary 100-page super spectacular, hints that Alan is attracted to men. The story focuses on Alan Scott visiting Doris Henton, the mother of Jimmy Henton, a young man Alan met on the fateful train ride in which he became the Green Lantern. It was a fatally wounded Jimmy who drew Alan's attention towards the Green Lantern, which empowered Alan and allowed him to escape the accident. When Doris asks why he was on the train in the first place, Alan says, "I was trying to get away from myself." Brief flashbacks hint that Alan was trying to run away from his attraction to other men when he and Jimmy began a brief romantic fling while on the train. Doris implies that her son had a similar experience and that he ended up feeling alone, the light inside him caged away, lest he risk repercussions in a less understanding time period. Doris tells Alan if the same light is inside him, then he should carry it forward to help other people find their way. Alan promises to do so before revealing his identity as Green Lantern and taking to the sky. Although it never overtly states Alan's sexuality, Dark Things Cannot Stand the Light clearly hints that Alan Scott is still a gay man, or at the very least attracted to men in his new Earth Prime incarnation. The time period of Alan's active duty as the Green Lantern adds a new wrinkle to his character and could set up potentially interesting complexities for the JSA going forward. It's a compelling choice for DC to make, especially in the sense that it'll make one of the oldest DC heroes part of the LGBTQ community. That is the story from CBR.com, kind of giving all the backstory as far as the character reboot with the New 52 on Earth 2. James Tynion and Gary Frank are obviously carrying some of those traits over from the Earth 2 Alan Scott into Earth Prime Alan Scott. While it is not stated that he is gay, it's certainly implied that he's attracted to men and likely gay here as well. This will certainly cause some controversy with the issue and within the comic book community. Anytime there are big changes, these things certainly happen. And people will definitely verbalize their frustrations with this change. And I'm certainly understanding and sympathetic to those points of view. I get that people don't like big changes. And this is certainly a pretty big change for the Earth Prime Alan Scott. But now let's bring Perch from Comics by Perch onto the channel, kind of talk to him what he thinks about this and kind of what it all means in the bigger picture. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the hot creators at DC Comics right now, including James Tynion. All right, Perch. So, the Thor issue wasn't the only big thing that we learned this week, although this is probably something people could have saw coming. It was in the 80th anniversary issue of Green Lantern. Of course, we knew, I believe, during the New 52 in Earth 2, Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, was a gay character in that version or in that multiverse, in that Earth 2 version. Now they have taken that aspect of the character and kind of brought it over to Earth Prime during the James Tynion story about kind of the origin of Green Lantern. He's trying to find himself, but he's met a man. There's an attraction there. And it turns out if Earth Prime Alan Scott wasn't gay, he was at least attracted to men and was trying to run from his past.
Yeah, I mean, and this is Tynion and Gary Frank doing a story. These anniversary issues have not always had the biggest stories in them. I mean, they're celebration anthology type issues. This one was a significant story. It was nice to see Alan Scott, and what struck me here is that you compare kind of the handling of a gay Alan Scott to the handling of a gay Bobby Drake. And it's like you can see just completely different worlds. I think this Green Lantern story was actually handled very, very well. I think it, they handled it with some nuance. We learned a little bit about the character, the struggle that was going on, kind of in finding himself and everything else. I thought that it was handled very well. I think it was a reasonably good story, and it was nice. I don't have the same. I mean, it's just in hindsight, a lot of people I've noticed have been criticizing this, saying, "Oh, here we go, we're retconning another character." But you just the way they handled it in this comic compared to how it's been done in other comics, just worlds different, in my opinion.
Certainly a different approach rather than just kind of blowing up the character and the character not being recognizable. With the way that they did it, you could see why you wouldn't know that he was, gay afterwards. Mm-hmm. After that story, he was kind of hiding that part of his life as the Earth Prime Alan Scott. And it makes sense within the universe and the story. It doesn't ruin the continuity because it's not overtly said that he is gay. It's just he is attracted to men, and he was trying to hide it, or he was unable to come out of the closet at that point in time because it was a different different time in America and a different society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it fits the timeline. The characters. The thing that strikes me here is that Alan Scott's personality feels like Alan Scott in this issue. He talked and acted and behaved like he always has. This character felt true to his motivations and kind of his temper and demeanor and everything else. So you see this struggle, and it doesn't feel like we're going and we're rearranging the character. It feels like we're building on what was already there. So I think it was handled well. It was nice to see Gary Frank doing this after Doomsday Clock. Good to see him doing another story here, and I like that they're going in and trying to really add some depth to some of these characters. I think that's I have no issue with it. I know many people will. I just think it was handled in a really well done way.
This had been part of the character before, obviously in a different version of the character, but you would expect that certain things about personality traits or things about the character would be similar over multiverses. So it makes sense. It makes sense that he wouldn't have been able to come out and just be an openly gay character during the golden age of comics. He would have been hiding that stuff. So I think it's an interesting take. I like the way that it was executed, certainly with much more finesse and careful thought than I think that Marvel did, obviously, with Iceman, to where you're not blowing the character up. If you're a fan of Alan Scott, it still feels like Alan Scott, but he has been fleshed out. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't ruin the character.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can still see the character in this. The character still talks like himself, sounds like himself, and again, I'm sure there are people who are going to have other takes. Certainly, people who liked and remember Alan Scott for the Golden Age. This doesn't fit with the character they knew. But again, I think if we go to a comic book explanation of all this, in the New 52, we did have this parallel universe. He was there. He was gay there. The universes did kind of merge and collapse, and we got things reconciled. So it makes sense that the character is written in this way. I just think the delicacy of handling this topic this way just spoke very much to the timing, the year, everything. It fit the era very nicely, and it fit the character. So I think in terms of doing this kind of thing, it was done with some care.
Yeah, obviously he was just a major part in Doomsday Clock from Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, where they basically took his life away from him, and removed his origin and things like that, and things were put back together. So you could see in that way that could have changed about that as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, overall, I was pleased. I haven't finished the issue. I've been going through it, but in general, this issue, this comic, this story, and the one that follows it by Jeff Johns and Ivan Rice, there's some good handling of the characters. What strikes me of these two, and maybe it'll break down as I go further into the issue, is that the characters feel like themselves. They feel distinct. They feel unique. They feel like I recognize the characters and how they're being written. And so that's just, it's unusual, unfortunately, in comics to get that. And so I was very pleased to see it. I thought, I have no issue with that. I'd be very interested to talk to somebody and debate out somebody who feels very strongly in the other direction, that just hated this. Why? I'd love to have that conversation.
Well, I will see if I can put that together. I am going to be reviewing this with Dylan from the Real Comic Book Gamer. That should be on the channel Sunday, but I'll talk to some of the regular channel contributors. If there's somebody out there that really hated it or opposes it, I'll try and bring them on the channel so we can talk about it, and you can hash that part out, since you wanted to have a kind of a conversation or debate about it. But I do want to say this, before we kind of wrap this up, is there a hotter writer in comics than James Tynion right now?
In DC, he's at the top of his game right now. I think if you look at some of the writers, and it's interesting because we get some of the bad comics, the bad writers overshadow some of the stuff that is coming out. But like we talked about earlier, Donny Cates is doing a really solid run on Thor, and his Venom is solid as well. I think Tynion and what he's done both with the Batman character and with the Green Lantern stories, it's just, you're seeing some of these writers that seem to really get the characters, and they're writing new stories that add depth but don't spit all over the legacy in the process. And I think that's something really nice to see. We hopefully, I think, are entering into a new age where you're going to see maybe some stronger writers get these titles that they really belong on and do some good work on it. So there's my hope. There's my optimistic thought of the day.
What's the wrestling term? The brass ring. It feels like someone put the brass ring in front of James Tynion's grip, and he went out and grasped it, and he's not letting go, because what he's done in Batman certainly rejuvenated interest in the character, revitalized the franchise. Joker War's coming up. People are really excited about that. It feels like he's orchestrating a plan. We got things happening over at Nightwing. Everything's kind of coming together, but it doesn't stop there. He gets one of the top billings in this Green Lantern 80th anniversary issue, knocks it out of the park, in my opinion. And then if you go over to Boom Studios, Something Is Killed in the Children is one of the better horror comics that you're going to find on the market. It sounds like his other comic, Wind, was also pretty successful for being more of a genre book.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think he's doing some great work. I think there's some, I think Peter Tomasi is another one to keep your eye on in terms of, you need these writers who can really kind of get the character and be able to go between a quiet action. This Alan Scott story was a lot of character work. It wasn't a lot of action, But you can go right over to Batman and see very heavy action in that comic. So he's showing he can deliver on both fronts very, very well. And very few writers right now can do that.
Speaking of JSA, we're not going to get too much into this, but a writer that's about to hopefully catch fire, Robert Venditti, is reintroducing the JSA into Hawkman. I'm pretty excited for that. Do you think he's going to end up is he going to get the gig on JSA that we've been waiting for since Rebirth was announced?
I mean, I really hope so. I think you mentioned Venditti's story. I think he's a great writer. I think DC has some really good talent in there right now with some of these writers. The question is going to be, are they able to kind of go and carve out their universe and do what they want to do, or are they going to get sucked into, the various events and other kind of nonsense? I think the gravity of what at times Bendis will do or Snyder will do is strong. So the question becomes, can these other writers still tell their stories and not get sucked into all that? I hope so.
Yeah, it's looking up for DC Comics. I'm pretty excited, honestly, for Death Metal to be over, because it feels like that's going to kind of consume the line along with Joker War, just to see what DC looks like coming out of that, because I think we're going to get a good idea what Jim Lee, Scott Snyder kind of came up with as the vision for DC moving forward. And I think we're going to see, the creators start moving teams. We know Williamson's going to be coming off Flash. We know Venditti said that he's getting his dream assignment. Seems like Tynion is sticking on Batman. I imagine Scott Snyder's going to do a new character. I'm hoping Nightwing, but we'll see what happens. But I think we're going to see some interesting choices as far as writers and creators coming out of Death Metal.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see what comes next. I think this being kind of the big conclusion to an era. I hope that, I said, I hope we get these powerful creators doing just solid work without a lot of interference, and I look forward to seeing it. What I don't want to see coming out is that we've got kind of one or two architects that everybody has to work under and with and kind of tie their stories in, and they're not allowed that freedom. I mean, we mentioned a bunch of names here today that I think are more than capable of just running a character and a story really, really well. So let's give them the breathing room to do that. And if they do that, I think DC's in great shape, at least in terms of the stories. There's always other issues, but they've got some talent. Let's see what they can do with it.
All right, Perch. Well, hopefully I'll have you lined up for that debate regarding the change or the confirmed change to Alan Scott, in the 80th anniversary. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for talking today.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.